What if your body was trying to tell you something about your health, but you just weren't quite picking up on the signals?
We often think about diabetes as a big, dramatic diagnosis,
Yeah.
but a lot of times our bodies will actually give us these kind of subtle hints long before we ever get to that point.
That's so true.
So today we're going to really dive deep into this whole world of type 2 diabetes reversal.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at some insights from a doctor who specializes in this, and we're going to be talking about the surprising early symptoms that you might not even realize are related to diabetes.
I'm intrigued already.
We're going to be diving into powerful strategies like detoxification and mindful eating,
I love that.
and ultimately how you can take control of your health. So get ready because we're about to unlock the secrets to a healthier you.
So when we think about diabetes, I think a lot of us immediately jump to those classic symptoms,
Right.
like excessive thirst, peeing all the time, that sort of thing.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of people think those are the first signs, but actually in today's world, they're not always the first things that pop up.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. It turns out that maybe 40, even 50% of patients don't even show those classic signs when they're in those early stages.
So then what are we missing? What should we actually be on the lookout for?
Well, there are some more, I guess you could say, subtle signs that can point to early diabetes, like have you been feeling more irritable lately? Or are you having trouble completing tasks that used to be super easy for you? Maybe your appetite's changed, your sleep's off, maybe you're having some mood swings or, just persistent digestive issues.
That is a much longer list than I was expecting. Yeah. But I feel like a lot of those things are just things that people would brush off as like everyday stress.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to really tune in to what your body's telling you, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these symptoms that seem totally unrelated could actually all be connected by this one underlying issue, insulin resistance,
Insulin resistance.
which a lot of times develops years before a diabetes diagnosis even happens.
So it sounds like that's really the root of the problem here. Can you kind of break that down for us? Like what exactly is going on in the body when we talk about insulin resistance?
Okay, so imagine insulin is like a key, right? And it unlocks your cells to let glucose in. Glucose is the sugar from your food, and it's what gives you energy. But when you have insulin resistance, it's like those locks on your cells are getting rusty, and that key just doesn't want to work as well anymore. So the glucose can't get into the cells as easily.
So the body is not really able to use its fuel effectively. What happens next? Does it just sort of give up?
Not at first. Your body's pretty smart. It tries to compensate for that insulin resistance by actually making even more insulin.
Okay.
It's kind of like if you're trying to turn a rusty key and you just keep pushing harder and harder to make it work.
So it's working overtime, but that can't last forever. Right.
Exactly. Eventually that leads to burnout. Your pancreas, which is where insulin is made, just can't keep up with that demand for more and more insulin. And that's when your blood sugar levels start to rise. And that can eventually lead to diabetes.
So it really is all about catching those early signs of insulin resistance.
Yeah.
Like we need to know what's going on before it gets to that full-blown diabetes stage.
Exactly. Our bodies are pretty amazing. They give us these early warnings through some of those less common symptoms we talked about. But we have to pay attention and we have to know what they mean.
So we've got to become like better listeners to our bodies, better detectives of what's going on.
Totally.
Are there any like specific things, specific indicators that we can look at to really kind of get a clear picture of whether we might be dealing with insulin resistance?
Absolutely. There are things like fasting insulin levels and even just measuring your waist circumference that can actually reveal insulin resistance sometimes long before your blood sugar levels become a problem.
Wow. So it's actually empowering because we can get ahead of this. We can be proactive about it.
Exactly.
And before we keep going with our deep dive into diabetes reversal, I want to take a moment to say a big thank you to London Heartbeat's Z Academy in the UK.
They're amazing. They're doing so much for health education.
They're offering over 140 healthcare courses and share so much valuable stuff on their social media.
So much good information.
So definitely check out their courses and follow them on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. You do not want to miss out on their future discussions like this one.
You'll thank yourself later.
So getting back to our deep dive, the doctor we're learning from today, he had some really interesting things to say about detoxification.
Yeah.
He uses this analogy of the body being like a house
Okay.
with these multiple drainage systems.
I like that.
So I'm picturing this house with these drainage systems. What happens next?
Well, imagine that those drainage systems are getting all clogged up with sugar particles.
Oh.
And that buildup it makes it harder to get those toxins out of the body. It's kind of like a sewer system getting backed up. Not good.
And so all of that, those internal blockages, they don't just stay hidden, do they? They manifest in different ways.
They do. They totally do. You might start to feel tingling in your hands and feet. Your vision might get blurry. Some people even experience, sexual weakness, hair loss, even just fatigue.
It's crazy how all of these seemingly random things can actually be traced back to one root cause.
Yeah, it's all connected. And this doctor, he emphasizes how important it is to do both external and internal detoxification.
Makes sense.
But of course, you always want to do it under the supervision of a medical professional.
Safety first.
Yeah.
So he recommends this really simple strategy that he calls S-T-P MRP.
Yeah.
Which I love a good acronym.
Easy to remember.
So easy to remember. Let's break that down. What does S-T-P MRP actually stand for?
So the M is for meat. He recommends cutting back on meat because it's acidic and it takes longer to digest.
Okay, less meat. Got it. What about R and P?
Both R and P actually stand for packaged milk.
Interesting.
And he suggests limiting that for two reasons. One, it can have that same kind of acidic effect on the body. And two, that protein in milk, casein, it can potentially damage those cells that produce insulin.
So it sounds like switching to alternatives, maybe coconut milk, soy milk, almond milk, something like that, could be a good move.
Yeah, exactly. And he says that even if you just break that habit for 7 days, you could see some serious improvements.
Okay, so small changes, big impact. I like it.
Absolutely. Small changes can make a huge difference. He also talks about this really intriguing concept called pseudomorphine.
Pseudomorphine. What is that?
So he says this is found in things like cheese, sugar, and even milk. And basically what happens is these substances trigger the release of those feel-good chemicals in your brain, like serotonin and dopamine.
So it's like they're literally messing with our brain chemistry to make us crave them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, have you ever craved pizza just for the cheese?
Oh, yeah.
That's pseudomorphine at work.
Okay, that's making me think differently about my pizza order next time. But let's move on to, balancing our plates in general. What advice does he give about that?
He has a really simple formula that he uses to create a balanced meal without having to do any complex calculations.
Awesome, because I don't like complicated meal plans. So tell me about this magic formula.
He suggests thinking about your plate in 3 sections: 25-30% carbohydrates, 50% vegetables, and 25% protein.
Okay, straightforward enough. Can you break down each of those sections a little bit more?
Sure. So for the carbohydrates, he recommends sticking with roti or rice, focusing on those whole grains, and trying to cut back on refined flour.
Okay.
For vegetables, go for a mix of cooked and raw salad, and if you can get local produce, even better.
Awesome.
And then for your protein, you can go vegetarian or maybe have a fish curry.
That sounds delicious and very balanced. I like the emphasis on fresh whole foods.
Absolutely. And to help fight off those pseudomorphine cravings, he says start your meal with those fiber-rich foods.
Oh, interesting.
It helps you feel full and naturally eat less overall.
That's a really good strategy. Set yourself up for success right from the beginning.
Exactly. He also mentions using smaller plates, which is a simple visual trick that can help you feel more satisfied with smaller portions.
Love it. It's all about those little mind games with ourselves.
No.
Now, I've heard that mindful eating can really play a role in blood sugar control, but it seems like this doctor kind of takes it a step further.
Yeah, he does. He actually brings in this really fascinating spiritual aspect to eating.
Okay.
He describes food as Brahma, the creator, and he suggests that if we approach our meals with this sense of gratitude and mindfulness, it can actually have a positive impact on our blood sugar levels.
I love that. It changes the whole way we look at food. It's not just fuel. It's like sustenance for our body and soul.
Exactly. He also talks about really engaging all 5 senses when you're eating, savoring every bite.
Sounds almost meditative.
It is. And paying attention to those colors, the textures, the aromas, all of it.
It's a whole experience.
And then he makes this really interesting observation that negative emotions during meals can actually have a negative impact on our health.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so creating a calm and positive atmosphere when you're eating can actually make a difference.
So no more eating lunch at your desk while you're stressed out about work?
Right, exactly. It's about creating a positive experience around food.
Okay, I'm definitely going to experiment with that. Now let's talk about fasting. It's a hot topic, but honestly, it can feel a little intimidating.
I know. He demystifies it in a really interesting way.
Okay.
He emphasizes that it's not about deprivation or control. It's really about just giving your body a break.
Like a vacation for your enzyme.
Exactly. A chance to rest, repair, and rejuvenate. And he recommends different durations depending on your needs. So like a 12-hour fast is good for pretty much everyone.
Okay.
But if you've got a slightly elevated BMI, he suggests going for 16 hours. And then for folks with more significant weight issues, he suggests 20, 24 hours or even alternate day fasting.
So there's an option for everyone, which is great. But I have to ask, what about people who are taking medication for diabetes? Is it safe for them to fast?
It's definitely something you need to talk to your doctor about because you may need to adjust your medication.
Okay, good to know. Safety first, always. Now, what about those sweet treats? I mean, can someone with diabetes ever indulge?
He actually has a really refreshing take on sweets. He thinks it's totally fine to enjoy them once in a while as long as you're strategic about it.
So it's not about completely cutting them out.
No, not at all.
It's about making mindful choices.
Exactly. He even suggests having your sweet treat at the beginning of your meal to help you feel full and satisfied.
Oh, interesting strategy. But what about the situations where, like, sweets are basically unavoidable, like social gatherings or holidays?
He's got some tips for that too. You can try to pre-plan your meals so you can indulge in sweets a little earlier in the day. Or you can fast before or after an event where you know there are going to be a lot of sweets.
Smart. So it really is possible to enjoy a balanced life, have some treats, even if you're living with diabetes.
Totally. And he also suggests experimenting with some healthier alternatives, like making your own desserts, using things like coconut milk, vegan ghee, and monk fruit sweetener.
So it's about finding those guilt-free ways to satisfy those cravings. Okay, let's talk exercise now. I mean, we all know it's important for managing diabetes, but it can be so overwhelming to try to stick to a strict routine.
Yeah, he takes a more holistic approach. Instead of focusing on, like, hitting the gym all the time, he stresses the importance of just moving your body more throughout the day.
So it's not about those, like, rigid workouts. It's about finding ways to be more active in general.
Exactly. He calls it reverse action. It's basically about counteracting the fact that we're all sitting so much these days.
I like that. Reverse action. Like we're actively trying to reverse the effects of our sedentary lifestyles.
Yeah.
So what specific activities does he recommend?
He's a big fan of brisk walking and interval training.
Okay, both of those are pretty manageable and adaptable to different fitness levels.
Totally. And he really encourages you to find something you enjoy, whether it's dancing, gardening, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, whatever works for you.
The key is to make movement a natural part of your life. So we've talked about diet, we've talked about exercise, we've even talked about the spiritual aspect of eating, but there's another really important element for overall health that we haven't touched on yet, and that's sleep.
Ah, sleep, the thing we all wish we got more of.
Right.
It's so important, and he really emphasizes getting your sleep patterns in sync with your body's natural rhythms, what they call your circadian rhythm.
So it's not just about how many hours we're clocking, but when we're sleeping.
Exactly. And he explains that our body's natural sleep-wake cycle is actually controlled by the sun. And when we mess with that rhythm, it can have a real impact on our health, especially when it comes to diabetes.
So we're kind of working against our own programming when we stay up late and things like that.
In a way, yeah. And he really stresses the importance of getting good quality sleep, particularly between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m.
Why that specific time frame?
That's when our liver is doing its best work, detoxifying the body, and that's also when our melatonin production is at its peak.
Makes sense. So what are some of his tips for getting better sleep?
One big one is to create like a digital detox zone at least an hour before you go to bed.
Okay, so no more scrolling through social media or watching TV in bed.
Right. Instead, try to do something calming like reading or listening to some meditation music.
It sounds lovely. It's like creating this little sleep sanctuary for yourself.
Exactly.
So what if you find that you're still struggling to fall asleep, even after you put away your phone and do all the things?
Well, even though he doesn't specifically address that, he does say that consistency is key.
So going to bed and waking up around the same time each day can help regulate our natural sleep-wake cycle.
Exactly.
And he says that getting enough sleep is just as important as eating right and exercising when it comes to managing and reversing diabetes.
Yeah, sleep is foundational. We often forget that. Now, I want to go back to something he said earlier about accepting that there's a problem in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to just kind of brush those early signs aside
Yeah.
or make excuses,
But
but owning up to it, saying, okay, something needs to change, that's the first step.
that's step one.
Exactly. And he uses this term from Ayurveda, pragya aparad, which means crime against wisdom.
Crime against wisdom. Wow. What does that mean in this context?
Well, he's talking about how we often know what's good for us, right? Like, we know we should be eating better, exercising, getting enough sleep, but then we don't.
We're committing a crime against our own well-being.
Basically, yeah. And those choices we make each day, they all add up. They can lead to bigger problems down the road.
It's a bit of a sobering thought, but it's also empowering because it means we have the ability to change those choices.
We absolutely do. And he really emphasizes that reversing diabetes isn't just about changing your physical habits. It's about changing your mindset, too.
Yeah, like your whole relationship with your body.
Totally. It's about becoming the healthiest version of yourself, both physically and mentally.
Love it.
And he believes that anyone can do it as long as they have the right information, the right support, and they're committed to making lasting changes.
That's a powerful message. It's a message of hope and possibility, and I think it's a really good place to pause for today. But before we move on to part 2, I want to leave you with something to think about. Imagine you could design a life where you feel healthier, more connected to your body, more in tune. What would that look like?
So welcome back to our deep dive into reversing type 2 diabetes.
Before we jump back into the specifics, I've been thinking a lot about that term, crime against wisdom. It's really been sticking with me.
It's powerful, right?
Yeah, it is. It's so easy to fall into those unhealthy habits, even when we know better.
It really is. It's like this constant battle. But the good news is, even those little changes can have a big impact.
Yeah, that's encouraging. And in one area where we can make those small changes that can have a big ripple effect is with our diet. We talked about that simple formula for a balanced meal. The 25-30% carbs, 50% veggies, 25% protein.
Yeah, it's a really good framework. It helps you build meals that are both satisfying and actually good for you. And don't forget that tip about starting with those fiber-rich foods.
Right, right. It helps you feel full so you naturally eat less overall.
Exactly. That one little trick can make a big difference.
What about portion control in general? Are there any other tips for managing that?
Well, he had that one about using smaller plates.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a visual cue, right?
Yeah.
It kind of tricks your brain into being content with less food.
I've heard that, and it really does work.
It's crazy how these little things can make such a difference. And of course, there's mindful eating, really paying attention to what you're eating, savoring each bite.
I love that. It's about slowing down, really experiencing the food, not just like, shoveling it in.
Yeah, exactly. And being present with your food, not just distracted. Remember what he said about negative emotions at mealtime?
Oh, yeah. Stress and all that.
Yeah, it can actually mess with your digestion and how your body absorbs nutrients. So creating a calm, positive atmosphere when you're eating can actually improve your health.
That's amazing. So we should all be taking a few deep breaths before we eat, trying to relax.
Absolutely. Make mealtime a peaceful experience.
All right, let's talk about fasting. It's one of those topics that people have a lot of questions about.
I know, right? And there are a lot of different opinions out there, but he presents a really unique perspective. He doesn't frame it as this restrictive thing, but more as a way to give your body a much-needed break.
He uses that analogy of a vacation.
Exactly. A vacation for your insides.
Yeah.
A time for your body to just rest and repair and recharge. And he suggests different durations depending on your needs. Everyone should try for at least 12 hours. But if you have a slightly higher BMI, maybe aim for 16. And for people who are dealing with more significant weight issues, he suggests 20 to 24 hours, or even alternate day fasting.
So it seems like there's a type of fasting that could work for just about anyone.
Yeah, there really is. But as always, talk to your doctor before you make any big changes, especially if you're on medication.
Definitely. Always good to get that personalized guidance. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about exercise. I know he takes a different approach to exercise too, right?
Yeah, he's not so focused on those strict gym routines.
Okay.
He's more about just incorporating more movement into your everyday life.
It's about being more active in general, not just those dedicated workout times.
Exactly. He calls it reverse action, like we're actively fighting back against all that sitting we do.
Love that term. So what are some of the things he recommends?
He's a big fan of brisk walking and interval training.
Both of those are great options.
Yeah.
Pretty accessible to most people.
Yeah, and he says you should really just find an activity you enjoy, something that fits into your life, whether that's dancing, gardening, whatever makes you happy and gets you moving.
Makes sense. The point is to make movement feel natural, not like a chore. So we've covered diet, exercise, even the mental and spiritual side of eating. But there's another key element we can't forget about, and that's sleep.
Oh, sleep. So crucial, and yet so many of us don't get enough.
It's true. He talks about the importance of aligning our sleep with our body's natural rhythms.
Our circadian rhythm.
Right, right.
Our bodies are designed to wake up with the sun and go to sleep when it sets.
It's like we're fighting our own biology when we stay up late.
And it can really impact our health, especially for people with diabetes. He emphasizes getting good quality sleep, particularly between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m.
Why that specific time frame?
That's when our liver is working its hardest, detoxifying our bodies. And it's also when our melatonin production is at its peak, which helps us get that deep, restful sleep.
Interesting. So what are some of his tips for actually getting better sleep?
He talks about creating a digital detox zone at least an hour before bed. No screens, no phones, no laptops.
It's like creating a little sanctuary for sleep. I love that idea.
Yeah, make your bedroom a peaceful haven. And instead of staring at a screen, maybe read a book, take a relaxing bath, listen to some calming music.
Sounds so much more relaxing than
Yeah.
scrolling through social media.
Yeah.
So what if you do all that and you're still having trouble falling asleep?
Well, he doesn't really give specific advice for that, but he does emphasize the importance of consistency. Going to bed and waking up around the same time each day can help regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle.
So even on weekends, try to stick to a schedule.
Exactly. It helps to get your body into a rhythm. And he really emphasizes that sleep is just as important as diet and exercise when it comes to managing and reversing diabetes.
Yeah, I think a lot of us underestimate the power of sleep. It's the foundation for everything else. Now, as we head into the final part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to that concept of pragya aparad, or crime against wisdom. It's such a thought-provoking phrase.
It really makes you stop and think.
It does. We often know what's good for us, but we choose to ignore that inner wisdom.
And those small choices, those seemingly insignificant indulgences, they can have a real impact over time.
It's like we're sabotaging ourselves without even realizing it.
And it can be hard to break free from those patterns, but he emphasizes that it's possible.
It's about changing our mindset, changing our relationship with our bodies.
Exactly. It's about becoming the healthiest version of ourselves, both physically and mentally. And he truly believes that anyone can do it if they have the right knowledge, support, and commitment. It's a message of hope and possibility.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into reversing type 2 diabetes. We've covered a lot of ground already.
We have, haven't we? From those early warning signs, the whole detoxification thing, mindful eating, fasting, sleep. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We even talked about those guilt-free ways to enjoy a sweet treat every now and then, and how to sneak in more movement throughout the day.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Exactly. But there's one aspect of diabetes we haven't really touched on yet, and that's the financial and emotional burden that comes with it.
It's a reality for a lot of people, unfortunately. Managing diabetes can be expensive. Testing supplies, medications, doctor's appointments, and then there's the potential for complications down the road. It all adds up.
And it's not just the financial strain, right? Living with a chronic illness like diabetes can really take a toll on your mental and emotional well-being, too.
Absolutely. It's that constant monitoring, the fear of complications, the lifestyle changes. It can lead to a lot of stress, anxiety, even guilt.
It's like carrying this invisible weight around with you.
It is. And it can affect your relationships, your work, your overall quality of life.
Now, the doctor we've been learning from, he acknowledges that burden. He really emphasizes that reversing diabetes isn't just about physical health.
Right.
It's about regaining your freedom, your
PC,
independence.
It's about breaking free from that dependence on medication and feeling empowered to take control of your health.
Exactly. And he says it's a journey worth taking, not just for yourself, but for the people you love.
Yeah, he talks about inspiring others, becoming a beacon of hope for those who are struggling.
It's a beautiful vision, you know, a world where diabetes isn't a life sentence. It's a challenge that can be overcome.
Absolutely. And he reminds us that true happiness comes from within. It's about cultivating a sense of gratitude, finding peace, having a purpose.
It's about shifting your focus from what you lack to what you have, from what you can't do to what you can. It's a really powerful message.
It is. So as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought from him. He says, don't chase happiness. Be happiness.
Be happiness. Let those words sink in for a minute. It's so simple, and yet so profound. It really sums up everything we've been talking about.
It does, doesn't it? True healing isn't just about addressing those physical symptoms, but taking care of your mental, emotional, and even spiritual well-being.
It's about that holistic approach to health, mind, body, and spirit, all connected.
And it's about believing in your own ability to change, to grow, to transform.
Absolutely. So we hope this deep dive has given you some new insights, maybe inspired you to take a more proactive approach to your own health journey?
You have the power to rewrite your health story. It all starts with that first step.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And remember, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep believing in the power of possibility.